Hey y'all, welcome back to my PCT Thru-Hike planning series. Today we are talking all about permits. Most importantly, do you need one? And if so, how do you get it? So first and foremost, do you need a permit? And the short answer is no. But yes. But also no. Sort of is the answer. If you can get a PCT Thru-Hike permit, it is unquestionably easier. This single permit replaces any other permits that might be necessary along the trail, barring a couple instances, which I'll mention at the end. But the PCT Thru-Hike, it's actually called the PCT long distance permit, is for anyone who plans to hike more than 500 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail. While most years almost everyone can get a permit, it keeps getting more difficult year by year. So what happens if you don't get a PCT permit? Or what happens if the only PCT permit you can get is on a day that doesn't work for you or isn't ideal? Well, you can still apply for all of the permits individually. Only 1/3 of the trail actually requires permits. That is 33 different places along the trail. Some of them are easier to get, simple self-registration at a trailhead. Others are a little bit or a lot more complicated to get. But hope is not lost. If you did not get a PCT permit, you can still hike it by cobbling together your permits on your own. Okay, so what doesn't the PCT long distance permit cover? Well, it does cover you taking a side journey to Mount Whitney. You can approach Mount Whitney from the PCT and return back to the PCT. That is included in the PCT long distance permit. What is not included is to go over the other side of Whitney or any other route other than to and from directly the PCT. The other thing that's not covered is your permit to enter Canada. This is done through the Canadian government. It is a simple application, but you do have to take care of it by email. You fill out a PDF, you submit copies of your passport, and you want to do this more than 6 weeks before you plan to enter Canada, but not more than 6 months before you plan to enter Canada. For more information about the Canadian entry permit, check the link in my bio. It's a fairly simple process, but it is a very important process. You do not have to enter into Canada in order to finish the PCT. You can backtrack back into the US, but most people opt to take the Canadian option because it is logistically a bit more simple. One caveat, if you haven't traveled to Canada, any sort of misdemeanor, including a DUI or a DWI, depending on what you call it where you're from, will bar you from being allowed in Canada. So do know that could be a factor if you have a DWI, a DUI, or any other misdemeanor or felony or anything on your record that could prevent you from securing a Canadian entry permit. Otherwise, the PCT long distance permit covers the rest of the trail. So how do we get a permit? Well, first and foremost, do you plan to hike northbound, so starting in the south, hiking to the south, or do you plan to hike southbound, starting in the top in Canada, north, top, and hiking south, southbound? You might see them abbreviated as NOBO and SOBO. Most people hike northbound. Most people start in Campo and hike north to Canada. If that is your plan, you have two opportunities to get a permit. You have an opportunity in the first tranche in November, which releases 35 permits per day for dates in March, April, and May. And then there is a second round of permits issued in January. And another 15 northbound permits per day become available for those same days. So 50 northbound permits per day are what is the total allowed permitting per day for the PCT long distance permits. If you're interested in going southbound, they do not issue southbound permits on the first permit issuance date in November. Those are only issued the second time in January. So just know that if you plan to go southbound, you'll need to wait until the second permit issue date in January to get your permit. Very, very important. You need to register in advance on the PCTA.org website. In order to be assigned a time, in order to be eligible to request a permit, you must register in advance, and that registration period changes every year. So please check the website to find out when that registration period opens and when it closes. On permit issue date, at your appointed time that you received the day before, you are able to log in, and you will then, at that time, no sooner, but at that time or later, you'll be able to view all of the available dates with permits still left to be issued. On the calendar, each day will show a number, and that is the number of permits that have been requested for that date so far. In this first tranche, again, they are issuing 35 northbound permits for each departure day in March, April, and May. So as you see those days fill up to 35, the options will begin to be less and less. I was lucky this year. I had a decent time, but I did see a lot of chatter online about people who did not get permits in that first tranche this year. As the days fill up, when they reach 35 permits, this first tranche, they will become unavailable. So you are only able to select a day from the available dates with less than 35 permits requested. Are you planning to hike with a partner or a family member or somebody else? You are able to link your permits in the platform. You can only link your permit with one other person, but you are able to link those. More information can be found about that on the PCTA.org website. Once you've requested your preferred start date, within 1 to 3 weeks, your permit will be approved. In the meantime, it will stay pending. They do go through each of these individually and manually approve them. So rest assured, in the next 1 to 3 weeks, you'll get an email letting you know that your permit has been officially approved. So how was my permit experience? Well, the appointment started at 10 a.m. on permit issue day, and my time was 11 a.m., 29 minutes and 50 seconds a.m. That was my very specific time. And when I logged in, I had my choice of all dates. The only date that was close to full was April 15th. Yes, April 15th. Probably the most popular start date, if one had to choose. I was after April 23rd, and I got it. While this is only anecdotal information, it does feel like the PCT permits are getting more and more difficult to get by the year. I have been following the PCT for a few years, ever since they instituted this new permit process, and every year it seems like there's more and more chatter from people who weren't able to get a permit or who weren't able to get a permit that feasibly worked for them. So while it was relatively easy a few years ago, it is getting harder. It is becoming more popular, and there are only so many permits to go around. So while you are very likely to get a permit and very likely to get a permit on the day that you want, it is not guaranteed. So I highly suggest keeping those expectations in check. So permit issue day is tomorrow. You have your time and you're wondering if it's a good time or not. Well, this year, the time started at 10 a.m. My time was at 11:29 a.m. When I logged in at 11:29 a.m., I still had my choice of every date. There was one date that was almost full, but every single date had at least one spot available. People who had their times after 2 p.m., there were no slots available. So if you, unfortunately, draw some bad luck and get a time later in the day, I would say around 2 o'clock, as we approach 2 o'clock and shortly thereafter, the pickings are going to be slim, if any. But don't worry, because there's a second tranche. There's a second tranche of permits issued in January. 15 versus 35 per day for northbound hikers, and then all 50 of the southbound permits are issued. Again, if you missed the registration period the first time, you have another registration period before the second tranche is released, and then the second tranche is released. Same way as the first. Now, let's say you didn't get a permit the first permit issue date. You didn't get a permit, or you didn't get the permit you wanted, or a permit that works for you the second permit issue day. What can you do? Well, keep checking the PCTA website. There are constantly people whose plans are changing, who have to cancel their hike. There are people who request a permit just because they think they might want to do the trail and then it doesn't work out. There are always so many cancellations. So if you still do not have the permit that you want, or a permit that's not ideal, after the second permit issue date, continue to check on the website. There is a very good chance that you will be able to snag a cancellation. For more details, don't hesitate to check the PCTA.org website. It is a wealth of information. Additionally, let me know in the comments, did you get your permit? Did you get the day you want? How did it go? Want to watch another video? Click here. Want to learn more about my upcoming trips? Click here. Want to subscribe and like all my videos and turn those bell notifications?